People were talking about desecration of the Quran. This is November 2003. The Abu Ghraib scandal broke in late April of 2004. And then there were other things that were just rampant, like home raids. Everywhere you go, I was hearing about home raids. Well, the U.S. military came into our neighborhood and came in and just took them in. They just took them in, and we don't know why. And you know, the story was almost exactly the same everywhere I went. They'd come late at night or in the middle of the night. They'd come barging in, smash through the front door. If they just would have knocked, we would have opened it. But they just come smashing through, and then they take people. And over time, then Abu Ghraib and other military detention facilities are just swelled with prisoners. And even the Army itself has admitted that over 90% of the people being held in Abu Ghraib are innocent. And big surprise when you look at the policy, and I've interviewed a lot of vets myself, big surprise when you go out and your goal is just to detain men between certain ages, 15 and 45, 12 and 70, whatever it is, then most of the people you detain are going to be innocent. It's common sense. But that was extremely common, and this is very, very early on in the occupation. Another thing that I think played a critical role was the fact that there was basically no attempt at real reconstruction. In the first year of the occupation under the CPA, $7 billion to this day went missing. And that was just the start. You know, we had Bechtel paid $2.3 billion. They withdrew in November 2006, and the majority of their projects were never finished. A huge percentage of them were never even started. I was reporting on this. I mean, Salam and I were going into Sadr City. I went south of Baghdad, and this is way back in January 2004, and interviewing the heads of water treatment plants who were telling me that no, there's no Bechtel. We don't know. I mean, maybe some guys came through and threw some paint on something, but we've seen no instance of any kind of real reconstruction or help from the Americans or the Western contractors. And as a result, even back then, I was going into Sadr City and talking to people and having them either turn their tap all the way open and not a thing comes out, or turn their tap open and this kind of light brownish water comes out that smells kind of like a combination of a wet, dirty sock and with gasoline in it. And that was the water. And so fast forward from January 04 to June 2008, and big surprise, according to Oxfam International, they had a report that came out a little bit less than a year ago. 70% of the total population of the entire country of Iraq does not have access to clean drinking water. Now, if this was the case in the U.S., if we had, I don't know, if we had massive hurricanes and earthquakes all at the same time and 70% of this country didn't have access to safe drinking water, how would that be reported? And contrast that with did you even know that about Iraq? And if so, well, how is that being reported in the corporate media here? We talk about unemployment. Unemployment has ranged through the about 6 months into the occupation. It's ranged from between 40 and 70%, according to the Iraqi government. Now, to give you an idea of how bad that is, we all have heard Great Depression stories in this country. Unemployment during the Great Depression here was about 26, 27%. In Iraq, at times, it's up to 70%. 45% of Iraqis are living on less than $1 per day in abject poverty. Most people in this room are familiar with how bad the sanctions were in Iraq. Lest we forget, this has been a bipartisan war of aggression against Iraq that has spanned decades. This is not just George Bush Jr.'s war against Iraq. This is a bipartisan war. We talk about the sanctions where over 500,000 Iraqi children died. We had the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright's infamous admission on 60 Minutes to Leslie Stahl when asked, do you think that 500,000 dead Iraqi children is worth the price of containment of Saddam Hussein? And she said, well, it's a difficult decision, but yes, we think the price is worth it. My point is, it was really bad during the sanctions. The country was strangled. Mostly men, mostly women, children, and elderly, and people with disabilities paying the price, the most vulnerable parts of the population. So we go from that. That's our baseline. When we talk about Iraq today, post-invasion Iraq, we're comparing it to the sanctions, right, where over 1 million people died, half of them kids. Compared to that, we've had a 9% increase in childhood malnutrition. I mean, compared to the sanctions, on all measurable levels, save for a very recent spike in oil production in Iraq, on all other measurable levels, everything is worse. Whether it's water availability, employment, security, go on down the list. Electricity, the average home in Iraq has less than 5 hours of electricity per day. Their gasoline now is starting to get up to match ours as far as cost. Before the invasion, it was, what was it, about 20 cents a gallon, maybe? 7 cents a gallon, right. Other things that I've seen in Iraq, to kind of piggyback on what Salam was saying as far as it's very clear when you're on the ground in Iraq that there was no design whatsoever to do anything to improve the lives of Iraqis or to help them. It's from the bigger military operations that I've covered, namely both in Fallujah, but then some others around Samarra and Ramadi. What I saw from the early days of my time in Iraq was that there seems to be basically a standard operating procedure of, if you're having a lot of trouble in a town, insert name of city here, Baquba, Ramadi, Fallujah, Samarra, Haditha, Al-Qaim, go on down the list, then we're gonna collectively punish the entire area. We're going to cut the electricity, we're going to cut the water, we're going to cut medical deliveries, we're going to cut food deliveries, we're going to start restricting who goes in and out of that city, Fallujah being the extreme example. And then once the operation starts, any moving vehicle, even if they're ambulance,